Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. For this afternoon, I'll be presenting on a Green Freight and Logistics program of Clean Air Asia. Um, because Clean Air Asia recognizes the importance of freight, especially in developing countries where economic growth is very fast. And as such, transport of goods will be increasingly in demand, and as such, the need for more trucks is expected. And due to that, there will be a need to manage the fleet, new fleet that enter the market, and uh, such and such that we mitigate the impacts not just on society and environment, but also on business. So this afternoon, I'll be discussing a quick overview of the components of the Green Freight program that Clean Air Asia is working on. And starting with why is it important for freight sector? What are the drivers? Key policy measures, which I've already discussed briefly earlier, how we engage stakeholders and its importance in developing green freight programs, role of evaluation tools and data collection for driving down emissions from freight sector. Uh, the Clean Air Asia's Green Freight program is anchored on its clean fuels and vehicles and green freight and logistics programs, which are part of Clean Air Asia's strategy for many years now. And very recently in our Better Air Quality Conference, which was held in Busan last year, we presented a new 4-year strategy for Clean Air Asia, where we aim to integrate the impacts of emissions and health, not just on freight sector, but on the whole transport sector for many of the Asian countries we work with. I'd like to start with the data, an analysis of 13 countries that was done by Clean Air Asia for all modes of transport, covering both private vehicles and commercial vehicles. And as you could see in this chart, we could see that the size of the circle shows the share of of in in the vehicle population of these modes. So you could see that HDVs, heavy duty vehicles, and light commercial vehicles are small portions of the whole vehicle population in these 13 countries, but they emit a large share of CO2, about 35% of CO2, and about 55% of particulate matter emissions for HDVs alone. Moreover, through an analysis that we've done for some countries in the Greater Mekong sub-region, that we call it, together with ADB, we've seen that the share of freight varies greatly across the countries in the Greater Mekong sub-region. So this just shows that there's a varying share of freight activity in percent ton kilometers. Also, we've seen that the fleet age, average fleet age for these countries are very old. And interesting enough, for Vietnam in particular, you could see here that about 89% of the fleet is older than 10 years. So those data show that freight indeed that there's a problem regarding the age of fleet in these countries, and we need to work on policies and measures to improve this situation through emission standards, fuel economy standards, and fuel quality standards. And so Clean Air Asia is supporting the Global Green Freight Action Plan of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. which aims to align and enhance existing green freight efforts, develop and support new green freight programs, and incorporate black carbon reductions into green freight. Um, Black carbon is one of the key agenda of the CCAC, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. Clean Air Asia has recently conducted the Green Freight Day in the Better Air Quality Conference, and this is the second time we've done it in the conference in Busan, and we always invite speakers to present on new emerging technologies and measures for reducing emissions from freight sector. For ASEAN, for the ASEAN region, there is the Kuala Lumpur Transport Strategic Plan, uh, where member countries have which agreed on, and they have they aim to develop a regional framework for green freight, and they intend to do the following. First, to create a green freight and logistics database, a green freight and logistics strategy specific for ASEAN, uh, determine what green logistics measures are applicable for the member countries, uh, conduct a best practices summary report for ASEAN member countries, and from which they will create a checklist for a guide for participating member countries as well as the private sector on what is green logistics and what are the practices that could be adopted. Currently ongoing is a workshop that being it's being the platform for fuel economy for ASEAN region is being discussed currently in Manila. And it would be interesting to see what will happen from that workshop. So just defining green freight program, this is from the UNCRD Environmental Sustainable Transport Strategy. And it's defined as a set of strategies, policies and practices for freight, all modes of freight, for reducing environment, climate, and public health impacts, improving social conditions, and enhancing economic development. And key here is that it's a work between government, private sector, and other stakeholder groups, including research organizations and nonprofit organizations. Key green freight measures and strategies can be framed into three areas: avoid, shift, and improve. And can be categorized as policy and regulation, technology, and operational improvements. At the national level, which would be the role of the government to promote or implement policies that promote market transformation. This includes taxation, economic and financial instruments, heavy-duty vehicle emission standards, fuel quality standards, and fuel economy standards, so that this would affect what new vehicles would enter the fleet. However, from the operational level or business level, there are key strategies, operational and technological strategies that could also be done to reduce emissions from trucks and the freight sector in general. So these include retrofitting, improving logistics, eco-driving, scrapping, and very important, this is one of the highlights that we always mention to private sector, that vehicle inspection and maintenance practices should always be considered. Because technology, while it's good, if there's no maintenance, no monitoring, no performance evaluation, the benefits from technology will be lost over time. What are the drivers of green freight? And so we say that green freight is not just an environmental consideration, it's also a real business decision. Key here is to sorry. Okay, key here is to drive down fuel costs for businesses. And we've mentioned here that regulation for many countries is becoming more stringent. And so compliance is another key consideration. Social responsibility. And this is because greening freight also includes improving safety from the sector. Customer demand, and we've seen that there is increasing demand from customers for the freight sector to actually reduce emissions. Finally, branding and leadership. And greening freight shows some form of leadership in the industry. And we've seen that green companies that actually aim to green their freight demonstrate some leadership in the market. The Green Freight and Logistics program that we try to promote follow the US EPA model, particularly the smart way of US EPA, which includes the following components: data collection and evaluation, quantification methodologies that's specific for participants of the program, depending on their capacity to provide data and measure data. Development of data collection tools, and which would be accessible only to participating participants or members of the program. And then from measurement, we have a branding and marketing and labeling. We evaluate their performance and then benchmark across the participants. So that so when we say freight, we include here the shippers and the truckers as well. So by benchmarking their performance, the shippers are able to see which of their service providers, their transport service providers, perform best, so that they have options. And so this sort of shapes the freight sector and promotes truckers to improve their fleet. Also included in this in the model is a technology verification program. So once we've determined which technologies are available, US EPA provides a technology assessment to verify if these technologies indeed improve the emissions or reduce emissions from the trucks. And then also very important is the setup of a financial assistance mechanisms for members of the freight sector in a particular country to adapt these technologies, especially for developing countries where we are dealing with fragmented sectors with small and medium enterprises that need financial aid to actually adopt new technologies. Okay. So what are the highlights of developing a green freight program? So first, we need to assess the performance of the freight sector, and then engage stakeholders. This includes shippers and truckers. Align goals for the program, and then we mentioned that aligning these goals as well as and then comparing the current performance with respect to the goal is very important. So this highlights the need for regular monitoring, regular monitoring system for a green freight program. And then support mechanisms. This includes a financial mechanism for and the technical assessments that are being done for components of the green freight program. So this is just the green freight program dynamic, the cycle of how it's being done for constant improvement in the freight sector, particularly in the reduction of emissions. I would like to include here this is just a diagram of how it works. So greening the freight includes cooperation between all sectors in the freight. And we recognize also not just a policy level, but also awareness, stakeholder awareness in decision making. That's why included in strategies for reducing, for greening freight are from standards. We also acknowledge the effectiveness of labeling. So we've been promoting this for LDVs through the Global Fuel Economy Initiative, uh, so that we could promote better decision making from those that purchase new light duty vehicles or cars, private cars. This could also be done for heavy duty vehicles if necessary. However, this would require a lot of technical aspects like regular testing and gathering information on the fuel economy ratings of vehicles, as well as keeping an online database for fuel economy values or emissions values for users to see, to compare uh, various technologies. And then through these components, we arrive at some sort of a market transformation for the transport sector, both light duty vehicles and heavy duty vehicles. Important considerations for national level policies are first off, fuel sulfur standards. You've mentioned repeatedly the importance of fuel quality in adopting emission control technologies. And so this is a diagram that Cleaner Asia regularly updates in terms of the fuel quality in various parts of Asia. And also, we also include here the current policy in EU, for example, and USA. So as you can see, many of these countries still have very high uh, fuel content. And that's why we are striving or working on communicating the importance of making these fuel quality more stringent for these countries. Another important policy that we've been discussing is a fuel economy policy. And for HDVs, this has been shown earlier. Only four countries so far has shown the adoption of HDV fuel economy policies: Canada, Japan, US, and China. Okay. And so for ASEAN countries, we this is a 2010 data estimate for the impact benefits of fuel economy policy. So for LDVs alone, through fuel economy policy, we expect it was estimated that there could be a 16% reduction in CO2 emissions. And adding HDV policies, we could see 26 to 27% improvement. However, we recognize that fuel economy policies for HDVs is very difficult to develop due to the high variation in operational characteristics of HDVs. So it's a challenge to adopt, to develop and adopt for many countries. Cleaner Asia has experienced promotion, developing programs for countries in Asia, and especially in China, where we were key in developing the China Green Freight Initiative, or CGFI, where it started with demonstration projects for working with the private sector. And as such, because of the efforts that has been done by our China office, There's been an issuance of green freight enterprise standards and green freight vehicle standards for some regions in China. And these also includes the adoption of China Emission 5 standards. Yes, so this is a picture of many of the stakeholder consultations, workshops that has been done for China. For India, we've also done work on greening freight, and this led to the Green Freight India work, where we customized a tool, the Clean Trucks Toolkit tool, which was developed by ADB, and customized it for local using local emission factors, and some features that were required, including a shipper's toolkit for measuring emissions. And so we piloted the tool for truckers and invited key players in the freight sector in India so that we could gather data on fuel consumption, truck characteristics, and from that we had a rough estimate of their fuel efficiency and emissions. And then we communicated that. We communicated the results of the tool to the stakeholders to show how much emissions they're doing and what kind of solutions that they could do they could adopt to reduce emissions from their trucks. Shown here is how the tool roughly looks. It shows cost estimates and this is a shipping module that is part of the tool. From that, we had estimates of the costs. This is a specification of the user of the tool. How many years would it for adoption of the measure? Estimated savings and CO2 reduction, and payback period for adopting a certain tool, depending on the costs that is input into the tool. So, we've from these results and through stakeholder consultations, it was decided that what we could pilot for the freight sector is adoption of eco-driving. So there was some form of eco-driving training and ex-ante estimation and ex-post estimation of emissions to evaluate the effect of eco-driving for improving fuel efficiency. And so from that, we've arrived at estimates for fuel efficiency improvements through eco-driving. And we've seen that there's a significant amount of improvement. Significant amount of improvement between the drive in terms of kilometers per liter from before training and after training. So we've seen vast improvements in fuel efficiency. However, we emphasize that this is a measure only during the program. So as I've emphasized, it's important to place performance monitoring mechanisms to follow up and to sustain the benefits that were acquired from such programs. Like I said, we've seen that technology adoption can improve fuel efficiency by about 3 to 5%, but could be lost over time with driver behavior. So it should be regularly and poor inspection and maintenance practices. I would like to include here some lessons that we've learned in greening for green freight programs. First, and I'll just read through it. Benefits from technologies must be verified to improve confidence and facilitate adaptation. We've seen that private sector are vocal on actually seeing the benefits. The cost they would like to see cost benefit analysis of technologies. Registration protocols must be improved. For some countries, this is a trouble in terms of adopting newer technologies. Fragmentation of industry, very common among developing Asian countries. So it's very difficult for small and medium enterprise to adopt new technologies because they're just small players, maybe just one truck or two trucks per operator, and they are incapable of changing their trucks. So consolidation of the sector and actually so that they could be able to financially take on newer technologies is very important. And also, if there are existing technologies, awareness, knowledge of these technologies, and financing must be increased. So sometimes we've seen that banks can already provide loans, provided that the risks that they will take are mitigated through consolidation. Um, and then the one that I've been mentioning, put monitoring systems in place, and programs must be developed based on sector needs. So there's a specific, it depends on the capacity of the sector on how they could adopt new technologies and improve or in terms of their performance in emissions. So just a few notes, just some general notes that I'd like to end with. Green freight is not one measure, but a combination of measures, not one size fits all. So this means that aerodynamics, tires, etc., it depends on the current situation. So we need to understand what's the situation in the cities to determine which is most applicable. And so this is where analysis, cost-benefit analysis comes in, where the various technological methodologies come in. And so evaluate and monitor performance through transparent methodologies. This means that we need data. We need data information and regularly monitor the performance to really see if there is an improvement in emissions from the freight sector. And finally, ensure everyone's on board, meaning stakeholder consultation is critical in improving emissions from the freight sector. And with that, I'd like to end my presentation. Thank you very much.